The gathering music, which you just heard, Which Side Are You On? The music's by Pete Singer, and the song was written in 1931 by Florence Reese, who was the wife of a coal miner organizer. And she wrote this song after they broke into her home, ransacked everything. They were looking to beat up her husband to try to convince him to stop organizing for the miners. And of course, the artwork was done by somebody's spade caller. Labor Day is a week away, and this is our first virtual Labor Day service, and welcome to all. My name is Rachel Daniels, and I'm your worship associate today. Our fellowship is served by our most fantastic and loving and justice-seeking minister, Reverend Lee Marie Sanchez. And today is the last Sunday of the month, and it's our social justice service. We welcome everyone, no matter who you are, who you love, your economic or immigration status, no matter your age or gender or color of your skin. We welcome you here. We have 7 principles that guide us. The 7 principles include believing in the inherent worth and dignity of each and every person. And they also include having compassion in your actions and working towards justice. Also, they include a meaningful search for truth. As such, in accordance with our principles, this congregation remembers and honors those men and women who made great sacrifices for all of us to better our wages and our working conditions. And there's no better way than to welcome back our guest speaker, Bill Steiner, to help us celebrate Labor Day. Bill is a practicing attorney. He served as an administrative law judge for the state of California. For the past 50 years or more, Bill has been an active supporter of the Orange County Interfaith Committee to aid farm workers. During more than 3 decades of practice, Bill has developed an unusually diverse expertise in workers' compensation and unemployment litigation, as well as appellate law. This morning, Bill will fill us in on some of the labor movement's history, the sacrifices made by all those before us, and what we need to do now to support labor justice. Additionally, Bill will give us some clues on which labor issues are going to be at stake in our upcoming 2020 election. And of course, as you know, please vote. And if anyone needs assistance getting a ballot or getting to a polling place, we can help you. This morning, our chalice, and everywhere on Sunday mornings, Unitarians light a chalice, and our chalice will be lit by Jonathan Hefferlin. The chalice represents illumination to the world that we're called upon to serve with love and justice. Jonathan is our dedicated, generous-hearted, and longtime member, a financial guru, proud father of 17 or maybe 18 adopted children. And in other times, he, along with Candy and Paul, would be making us coffee, setting up cakes and other treats if we were in our building. Jonathan?
Thank you very much. I cheated a little last night and used some 35-year-old matches. I'm hoping this works. Yeah, there we go. Thank you for this honor. Let us be ever mindful of most of the rest of the world. It's vastly in worse shape than we are. And let's be moved to help somebody hurting, anybody. And I am being really grateful and salute those whose devotion to these meetings make it possible. Being grateful can be a respite during these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And if you have a chalice and want to light yours at home, please. We have 2 centering thoughts this morning. And even though everyone will be muted, if you care to, please read along. They will be on your screens. The first one, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I'm changing the things that I cannot accept. That's Dolores Huerta, labor organizer and leader of the Farm Workers Union. Number 2, what we would like to do is change the world by crying out unceasingly for the rights of the workers, of the poor, of the destitute. We can throw our pebble in the pond and be confident that its ever-widening circle will reach around the world. Mother Jones, union activist, and leader. I read that Upton Sinclair knew Mother Jones, and he even made her a character in one of his novels, which was a lightly fictionalized work called The Cold War. He described her, and the book, The Cold War, chronicled the bloody Colorado coal strike of 1913 and 14. And Upton Sinclair described her as a little woman, wrinkled and old, dressed in black, looking like somebody's grandmother. And Mother Jones, in truth, was the grandmother of hundreds of thousands of miners. Our opening hymn is not yet one of Carol's favorites, but it could be after this. Our very gifted Carol will be playing a song written in 1940 by Woody Guthrie. And it was written after Woody was criticized for not writing songs that included women in the labor movement. Carol?
This is called Union Maid. Was a union maid, she never was afraid of brooms and tins and company drinks and the deadly chefs who made the ring. She went to the union hall where the meeting it was called, and when the Legion boys came round, she always stood her ground. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die. This union maid was wise to the tricks of company. She couldn't be fooled by a company stew. She'd always organize the guys. She always got her way. When she struck out her pay, she'd show her card to the National Guard, and this is what she'd say. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll take a moment to remind ourselves why we come together as a community. There's going to be a short affirmation that we'll all read together, unmuted. And even though we are reading together and it doesn't sound quite right, but it's really heartening to hear each other and then have the wonderful Zoom flash the individual names as it picks up our individual voices as we read together. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity.
May we
know once again
that we are
that
not
we are not
isolated
isolated
beings,
but connected
in
mystery
and miracle
to the
to the
universe,
universe, to this community, and to each other.
Now we're going to have spoken joys and sorrows, and Don will highlight you, and it's whatever on your heart today. Sharing that you can be with the one you love, getting more doctors in the family, and of course missing grandchildren. Brian and I have a few here that I think we could lend out if you guys want. And also our gratitude for our physical and mental health in these times. So thank you all for sharing.
stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Also don't give up the fight.
Preacher man, don't tell me heaven is under the earth. I know you don't know, but life is really worth. It's not all that glitters is gold. Half the story has never been told. So now you see it right. Stand up for your rights. Come on, y'all.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights.
Get up, stand up, stand up, y'all.
Don't give up the fight.
Yeah.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. So don't give up the fight.
Well, most people think that great God will come from the sky and take away everything and make everybody feel high. But if you know what your life is worth, you would look for yours on earth. So now you see the light. I'm begging you to stand up for your rights. For yours,
Get up, stand up.
I make you, yeah.
Stand up for your rights.
Come on, say,
Get up, stand up.
no, no.
Don't give up the fight.
I make you, yeah.
Get up, stand up.
Come on,
Stand up for your rights.
yeah.
Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight.
We're sick inside of your ism, schism, games, dining, go to heaven in Jesus' name, Lord.
We know where we understand. My God is the living man.
You can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. Say, now you see the light.
What you gonna do?
Stand up for your rights. Oh yeah.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights.
You got to get up.
Stand up. Don't give up the fight.
Fear is the enemy.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your rights. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Never give up the fight. Never give up the fight. Never give up the fight.
Never give up.
Never give up the fight. Don't give it up. Never give up the fight. 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 Never give up the fight.
Don't you ever,
Never give up the fight.
won't you ever,
Never give up the fight.
There are many ways to get up and stand up and fight for justice. And one of those ways is to give financial support. We have a slide that's going to be coming up that's going to show ways to donate. And it's also on your email notice for the worship service. It's the same information on how to make online contributions. So let's all get up and stand up, because our funds that we collect, we make sure that they go to a greater good for our world than they could have done alone. So your offering will sustain and grow the mission of this congregation and all the good work it does in bringing justice and balance to the world. And all of us, I know, we give in love and we give in hope. And also, if it's not a financial contribution that you can make, going back to what Jonathan said when he lit our chalice, let's go out and help each other. And now we're going to have a quiet moment of meditation, prayer, reflection, whatever feels right for you. You can just place your feet on the ground, hands resting in your lap, and take a moment to breathe. Breathe in love, breathe out fear, quiet our minds, forget about the election, and just breathe. We'll take a minute and then Carol will bring us back. Just take a moment to breathe.
How are y'all doing? I hope well. It's great to be here again with you, even if only virtually, on this very important and timely occasion, celebrating America's 134th Labor Day. Let me mention that I do have a PowerPoint presentation. It's a collection of photographs. They have captions. Unfortunately, because of time considerations, I won't be able to discuss each individual photograph, but let me describe the first three. And I'm going to get on screen sharing here and do my best.
There you go.
Thank you, Don. I appreciate that help. I know you helped me before, and I think this is the first time I'm using it this way. So again, I was going to just describe the first three of these photographs. Of course, the first one you see here is a happy Labor Day wish, and I do wish you all a very happy Labor Day. And I advance it with the enter space bar, and this is a photograph I thought I would include because of what it represents. It represents a family appears to be packing up for a weekend vacation. And we take this for granted, but of course, one of the things we'll be talking about today is the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which gave us, as a normal week, 5 days and 40 hours. Of course, if it's over 40 hours, we get paid time and a half, and that's thanks to the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. We owe a debt of gratitude to organized labor and all of its supporters who won those rights for us during President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration. And so that is why that photograph is there. And just quickly, I will go to the next one, briefly describe this, and then we'll get on with the show here. This is a photograph of New York City, Union Square, and this is supposed to be a photograph of the demonstrators at the 1882 strike in the city of New York for the 8-hour day. Some writers consider this to be the beginning of Labor Day in 1882, but there were other events, major events in 1886, which I'll be talking about. So here we have a photograph of what some consider to be the very first Labor Day parade, organized by Peter McGuire of the Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners, his associates, and many, many other unions. And I'll then advance some of these other photographs and start talking with my presentation, and I hope it makes sense how I weave these into the talk. I do want to mention, though, that last Sunday I had the pleasure of hearing Don West Jr., the same person who helped me out with all this technology a few minutes ago. Thank you so much, Don. And this was at your Sunday service, and Don spoke about the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. He mentioned specifically, too, that I think are particularly important regarding Labor Day. And those were, as your worship leader, Rachel Daniels, just pointed out, the first being the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. These are themes that run throughout our labor history. They are fundamental core values of Labor Day, I believe, and we need to keep them in mind as we do our organizing and go forward with all of these challenges. It is a good time to be celebrating Labor Day. I was just reading that the Gallup poll has found nationally, 62% of Americans support the basic idea of unions and the basic goals of unions. It's gone up considerably in the last couple of decades, but it's not as high as it was in the mid-1950s, which was 75% of all Americans. At that time, 1 out of 3 workers was a member of a union. Right now, it's about 1 out of 10. Just to put this in a little perspective, we have another slide, another video that'll be a little bit later in the presentation. And it is a labor poster from the 1930s and 1940s. It has a quotation from President Roosevelt himself. It states, quote, "If I were going to work in a factory, the first thing I'd do is join a union," end quote. What a contrast to our present national leadership. I'd like to focus on a number of specific challenges and issues in these very polarized and dangerous times. The important thing is to know what we as a community can do, and I'll be talking about a number of those examples. Of course, I won't be able to even list all of them because there are so many issues. But let's start out. First, I want to mention an episode very briefly because it's also, I think, instructive about how we approach these things and some of the dangers involved. And that was an event in 1886 known as the Haymarket Affair. 1886, of course, was the first national call for a strike for the 8-hour day. It was called by the American Federation of Labor that just formed that year. And in those days, the normal workday was 10 to 12 hours, 6 days a week. There was a strike in the first week of May 1886 at McCormick Harvester Factory, a company that made farming equipment. The strike was for an 8-hour day and an increase in wages from $1.50 a day to $2 a day. There was a peaceful rally, but unfortunately it turned violent. Someone who was still unidentified, there was never a definitive identification of the bomb thrower, but a bomb was thrown at the police, killing several of them, and the police responded by firing into the unarmed crowd of workers, killing at least 4 of them. The person who was a suspect was identified with an eyewitness witness who did testify in court. He was indicted, but he fled the country and was never apprehended. However, about 8 of the organizers were associated with the anarchist movement at that time. There was a climate of fear and hysteria, and these 8 people, even though they weren't at the rally, except for one of them, Samuel Fielden, who was a speaker, He was speaking to the crowd as it was dispersing and when the bomb was thrown. The others were not even present at the time. Nevertheless, all 8 were convicted of murder, 4 were hanged, 1 committed suicide, and 3 were pardoned by Illinois Governor John Peter Altgeld. And his words are very important for us to remember, I believe. Governor Altgeld joined a worldwide protest against the convictions. The convictions were condemned as a miscarriage of justice by many notable figures, including playwrights Oscar Wilde, George Bernard Shaw, celebrated attorney Clarence Darrow, and many others. Governor Altgeld, in pardoning the defendants, declared that their trial, quote, never discovered who it was that threw the bomb that killed the policeman, and the evidence does not show any connection whatsoever between the defendants and the man who threw it, end quote. Governor Altgeld also declared the defendants were, quote, victims of hysteria, packed juries, and a biased judge, end quote. So out of these events from 1882 through 1886, we now have our Labor Day, the first Monday in September, and we have International Workers' Day, also known as May Day, celebrated officially by 66 countries and many others who honor the contributions of organized labor. So let's turn to some of the issues, specific issues and challenges that we are facing and what we as a community might be able to do. I mentioned the Fair Labor Standards Act. It did provide for a 5-day week, 40-hour week. And it also was aimed at outlawing the heartless practice of permitting the exploitation of child labor. The idea was that children under 16 would not be employed, with few exceptions, and children under 18 would never be employed in hazardous occupations. But there were many shortcomings and loopholes in this law. The current regulations are very weak. There are many exemptions, and as a result, we have children as young as 12 years old working in the fields. There have been studies done about this. We have numerous organizations. We have Human Rights Watch has done studies. It started in 1978, and its recent study in 2019 points out many of the problems, although there has been some progress made, significant progress in reducing child labor in the last 30 years by 1/3. The American Journal of Industrial Medicine has found that every day 33 children are injured on the job. There is no limit to the hours many of these children as young as 12 can work outside of school. There are not toxic standards for restricting children from working near dangerous substances, including tobacco. So Representative Lucille Roybal Allard, a Democrat in Los Angeles, the 40th district, introduced some legislation in 2013 and was reintroduced in June of 2019 to correct many of these deficiencies. It's called the CARE Act, Children's Act for Responsible Employment. It deserves our support. It's one of the things that we need to talk more about so that we can finally get passage of this important protective legislation. Another issue that we're facing that, of course, has been in the news quite a bit is the Raise the Wage Act. On July 18, 2019, with strong union support, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Raise the Wage Act. And this would be the first increase in the federal minimum wage in more than 10 years. The increase is from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour by 2025. The legislation is held up in the Senate, where Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky has failed to bring the bill to the floor of the Senate, despite numerous requests by Democrats. The Raise the Wage Act, according to the chair of the House Education and Labor Committee, Robert Scott of Virginia, will raise the wages of 33 million Americans and will lift 1.3 million Americans out of poverty. And now with the COVID-19 pandemic and the current economic crisis, an increase in the minimum wage likely would help relieve more than 1.3 million workers of impoverished conditions. The question remains, what can we do about these challenges, these issues? And of course, we can take actions that are traditional actions, such as writing, emailing, and calling elected officials. If health conditions and COVID permit, we can get out into the street, as tens of thousands of Americans did between August 27 and 29 this month, and demonstrate as they did at the March on Washington. Representative John Lewis said, we need to get into some good trouble. And he wasn't talking about violence, he wasn't advocating any destruction, but he was saying we need to get into the fray of the battle on these issues. We need to do more to move some of these human rights and workers' rights issues forward and exercise our First Amendment rights in every way possible. If we cannot go in person to participate in these activities, we can use Zoom and virtual meetings as we're doing today. We can organize and participate in educational forums, maybe have community film events, book discussions. There are many excellent documentaries and books available right now. We can also attend community organizing events like Orange County's Great American Write-In. They were going to celebrate their 35th this year, but unfortunately because of COVID, it had to be canceled. If we are farm worker supporters, we're fortunate in Orange County, we can work with the Orange County Interfaith Committee to aid farm workers, which for a half a century has been helping the Farm Workers Union and the National Farm Worker Ministry to improve working conditions for farm workers and defend their union rights. We can also take some direct action around the upcoming election. We can volunteer, we can do phone banking, we can help with voter registration, we can volunteer as poll workers, we can call union organizations and ask about ideas. We can call the Orange County Federation of Labor to see if they have a need for volunteers or any ideas on how we can help. That pretty much brings me to the conclusion. Here is that poster with President Roosevelt's quotation. I'll leave on the screen for a minute. And there's been a great amount of activity over the last decade or so around all kinds of workers' rights, immigration rights that are relevant to this, racial justice, gender equality for women, and also wage parity for people of color. And now we come to the final photograph. And this photograph says, workers' rights are human rights. And when I look at this photograph, it seems to be asking me, which side are you on? As we heard in the song, great song of Pete Seeger earlier. So we have to ask, are we on do we stand and are we on the side of workers' rights? If we don't stand for workers' rights, do we truly stand for human rights? And if we don't stand for human rights, what does our democracy stand for? I truly believe that this year, Americans will take a strong and a resounding stand for both workers' rights and human rights. Thank you again for inviting me to participate in your Labor Day program. Stay well and have a very happy Labor Day.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill.
That's great.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill.
You're
From
welcome.
raising wages to voting in November, changing our senates so that we can come back to our first principle of supporting the worth and dignity of all people, organizing, writing letters. It was, as Peggy sent to chat, this is a great list for us to take action. And Bill, you put it so beautifully. If we're not for human rights, what are we about? Now's the time when we extinguish our chalice, and we know that its light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts. It's an important tribute to those unions and those workers whose sacrifices continue to give our nation its strength and prosperity, and to all of us as we go out and do great deeds, helping one another, or small deeds with a great heart, but at least we do something. And now we're going to join our hearts together, but we'll be joining our hearts and not our voices for our closing song. Thank you, Jonathan. Please sing along while you're on mute as Carol sings, "Let There Be Peace on Earth." And again, we're joining our hearts, but not our voices. And then Bill will be around for a few minutes afterwards to answer any questions you may have during our virtual cafe. Our very gifted Carol, thank you.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With earth as our mother, we are family. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my song of love. Take each moment, live each moment, peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Thank you, Carol. Now our virtual cafe.